Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I begin asking questions, I want to also thank the members of the panel. You managed to be scheduled just moments before the detonation of the nuclear option on the Senate floor, and we all had to interrupt you and go down for a series of, what was it, 8 or 9 votes while we had an unfortunate skirmish. That being said, you were very polite to remain here with us and continue to be available, and I appreciate that. Mr. Leonard, I want to start with you, but I'd encourage all the witnesses to listen to the question because I'd be interested in the thoughts that any of you have on this issue. The issue that I want to discuss with you, Mr. Leonard, is the scope and authorities of the new regulator that we are contemplating establishing in this legislation. Each of you in one way or another, and many others who have commented to us, have talked about how important it is to be sure that certain authorities and powers are given to FEMIC if FEMIC is established as this legislation contemplates. And as you sit back and look at what we are poised to do here, it is, as I see it, the creation of yet another very big, powerful, comprehensive regulator in our financial system. And I see the need for that. The question that I have is, how do we assure that we establish this new regulator with the appropriate authorities, powers, and scope, but avoid the duplication with the existing regulators in this space and avoid what I consider to be serious potential for increased regulatory cost and burden inefficiencies, which will then play out in the marketplace as a higher cost of credit and so forth. So I know it's a broad question, but I think it's a very critical question that we've got to answer. Mr. Leonard?
Senator Crapo, that's a very good question. I think since this is such an important, normally as a representative of industry, we have obviously we don't want to be regulated too much. But having said that, this is such an important part of the economy, and it's so important to get this right that, significant regulatory authority for this new regulator is necessary. I think FHFA, through what the Congress did through HERA in 2008, obviously at that time it was too late to save Fannie and Freddie, but FHFA has a lot of the authority now that the new regulator would need. I think it would have to be clarified and added to, since I think the prudential authority to essentially act like a bank regulator, look at their be able to go in, look at their practice of the guarantors of these new entities that would be providing the private credit enhancement. I think the regulator needs the kind of authority, much of which FHFA has now, but I think, as others said, it needs to be refined and added to in some respects so that the regulator can understand what's happening in each of these companies. Are they following the practices on the types of steps that they should be taking as they do their own due diligence on the mortgages that they're guaranteeing? I think the point that you make is very true in that there is a lot of mortgage regulation that's already been put into effect through Dodd-Frank, and it's really not now having an effect. I think as we envision, and others can comment, that obviously anything getting the government guarantee would be a qualified mortgage. I think that we would ask that the new regulator, and I think the kind of legal authority has to be carefully considered in terms of, is it consultation or coordination or mandated joint rulemaking with either CFPB or some type of coordination on the consumer-facing aspect of mortgage regulation and what originators and the insurers have to do. So I think we are leery of too much overlapping regulation, but I think for the most part, for the new entities that would be doing credit enhancement, the new regulator, FHFA Plus, or FMIC, would have to have some pretty significant authority.
Mr. Pollard, your thoughts?
Yes, I think the concern is valid, but I also think we have lessons learned and experience coming from this crisis. First, many of the participants in this market are already regulated. There needs to be respect for that. I don't think the S-1217 disrupts that. We at FHFA have both formal and informal relationships. As I stressed in my testimony, cooperation and consultation is a very good thing. Many of the rules in Dodd-Frank have required people to work together. Sometimes challenging, but I think it's been a good experience in terms of that. Also, FIMIC could employ what now exists similar to the Fed, the FDIC, and the states, which is a state and federal working group, which can help smooth and make sure things work effectively. I would note that CSBS has been made part of the FIFIEC, so the state bank examiners have been incorporated to facilitate that. I think what Mr. Leonard said is very important. I think markets do want active regulation, appropriate regulation. There is a fear of contagion. We don't want another systemic event. And I believe that making explicit authorities, but having some flexibility, as 1217 proposes, is a course to take. None of us wants overlap or additional burden.
Thank you. And to the other witnesses, my time is up, but if I don't get to come back to you on that, I'd welcome your written responses as well.